Dr. Kelly here. Let's talk about pyroluria and why you would want to rule that out if you have social anxiety. So my job is I work with people with chronic stress and anxiety and help them regain vitality through quantum health strategies and nutrition. And when people come to me and they are talking about things like having anxiety and like this inner tension, really since childhood, they're very uncomfortable in social situations. It's not that they can't push through that and that they're not social people. Sometimes they even do speaking gigs and they can get on stage, but they have a lot of anxiety around that. They really have to push themselves. That's not that unusual. But it's also combined with things like, not wanting to be seated in the middle of a busy restaurant. They're really uncomfortable with that kind of scenario, having bouts of depression or that kind of nervous exhaustion where you've just feel like you've just been anxious, and then you just collapse into a bout of depression. So those are some of the things, if people are talking about that kind of anxiety, even if people are talking about kind of the anxiety you hold in your body, I will go through a whole questionnaire that I'm not going to go through here, but I go through a questionnaire and we start to see, is this maybe pyroluria? So pyroluria, when I was in my training for mental health nutrition, I learned it as a condition of the heme. More specifically, it's this overproduction of a hemoglobin byproduct, HPL. And so this overproduction of HPL actually binds to zinc and B6. There is some indication that it could bind to other nutrients, but where you see the most in the research is B6, so vitamin B6 and zinc, and it binds to that, which then makes it unavailable and it inhibits the absorption in the body. So you become deficient in B6 and zinc and possibly some other nutrients, but those are the two that I most specifically see. And if you're kind of suspecting, maybe I have this pyroluria thing, pyroluria is also known as pyrrole disorder. And it's a kryptopyrrole urine test that you can get. You can ask your doctor if your doctor won't do that, or doesn't know what you're talking about, or insurance won't pay for it. You can order it from a lab. I use DHA Labs. I do not have an affiliation with DHA Labs. I don't have a discount code, but that's just who I have used. They're very reliable. It's a pretty simple urine test. You have to freeze stuff. It's not that simple, but it's pretty easy to do. And then you can ship it off, or you would get a report back that you could then work with a practitioner if it comes back as positive, that you actually do have these excessive, like a high amount of kryptopyrroles in your urine. That's an indication that you might have pyroluria. Now, there is some evidence that that's genetic, but there's a growing body of evidence that can actually come about by emotional or environmental stress. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this genetic condition of the heme. And an orthomolecular approach to working with mental health is not new. Actually, Dr. Pfeiffer did this work back in the 1980s, wrote a book about it, but he talks about using specific nutrients for different disorders. Now, I don't even like to look in terms of disorders, but what can be really helpful is if you have had this kind of anxiety and inner tension your whole life and feel like you have social anxiety, it's pretty easy to fix if we find out that you actually do have pyroluria. I do recommend that you find, it's usually people in the nutrition space nutritional therapists specifically. I don't know that a registered dietitian would really know about pyroluria, but there's also an academy for addiction and mental health nutrition. That's where I got some of my training and certifications. And all of us are trained in pyroluria. So you can find a person, an actual practitioner. And if you find that you do have pyroluria, I would recommend that, because you don't want to just all willy-nilly start taking a bunch of supplements. You would work with B6 and also zinc, because that's what becomes deficient in people. And when we have B6 deficiencies, things will start to show up. Have poor dream recall. That's a sign of low B6. But you can have this kind of anxiety that shows up It might not even be pyroluria, and you still could be B6 deficient. You could test specifically for zinc and B6 and these different things. That's possible. I just don't recommend that you start taking a bunch of supplements if you are, unless you know that you're actually deficient. You can, but I wouldn't recommend that you do that. I would recommend that you work with a professional that knows what they're doing and can help you. And you can also, if you're suspecting that you maybe have this, or a lot of people are deficient, you could just use food to start to get more vitamin B6 in your diet and more zinc. There are some that I don't necessarily recommend because, like, sweet potatoes and spinach are really high in oxalates. So yes, they have vitamin B6 in them, but they're really high in oxalates. And so that can be a problem for some people in small amounts. And if they're actually in season, like avocados in season also have a lot of B6, and they're a good source of a lot of different nutrients, and they're good fat. So if you can tolerate avocados and they're actually in season near you, that might be a good thing for you to include in your diet. I tend to lean towards the animal sources of these foods because they're more bioavailable and your body's more readily can absorb those. And we don't have to worry about whether it's in season or not. If you can get local, grass-fed, pastured, or wild foods like wild fish, wild caught fish, salmon, and tuna are also really good choices in terms of B6. And then for zinc, oysters are a great source of zinc if you can eat oysters and get oysters and they are actually in season for you. Lamb is also full of zinc. Grass-fed beef, also a really good source both for B6 and for zinc. So some of those eggs too, also really good. Eat the egg yolk. It's not in the egg white, it's in the egg yolk. Those are the nutrients that we want. So looking at nutrient deficiencies and mental health is not a new thing, but it's sometimes really surprising to people that it's a nutrient deficiency that's creating this kind of angst, particularly chronic stress and anxiety that's held in the body, or the ruminating. And also, you, of course, want to make sure you have the raw nutrients, the essential amino acids to make the neurotransmitters that you need. But that's a whole nother topic. I have other videos on that. For this, I just want to acknowledge that it could be pyroluria, and that's not H. pylori. That's a different thing with the gut. This is a urine test that you can get to rule that out or in. And if you're not sure, but you kind of suspect that you have an issue with pyroluria or maybe some nutrient deficiencies, then you can start incorporating more foods with B6 and zinc and see how you feel. Thanks for watching. I hope this was very helpful to you. If you liked it, please like. And if you haven't already subscribed, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel.